in the backyard burning their personal papers. Okay. Hey, Jen, how are you? I say that every time. Hey, Jen, how are you?
Yeah, but that is kind of how we normally greet each other.
Yeah, yeah. So how's everything going?
Good. We go back to work tomorrow, so that's a
Uh,
thing.
well, and you know what? And I think one of our next episodes we'll talk about working and being 50 and 60. And I told someone that we were going to be doing that topic, and
Hmm.
they said, "Can you ask about 40 and up too?" So we'll have to make sure that we include not just 50 and 60, but 40 also.
Yeah. Okay.
And when we get to that point. So let's talk about our names this week. What is your name about?
So mine, I love my daughter, because I do love my daughter, but tomorrow actually is National Daughters Day. And
Oh,
so
okay.
I thought that I would, give homage to my daughter today because I do love her. I don't have any sons. I only have my daughter, my one and only. Um, and despite the things that I say about her, she is really a great joy to my life. So I love my daughter.
Okay. Is there a National Sons Day too?
Yes, there is.
Oh, is it the next day? Or
No, no, it's within I think a couple of weeks or something like that, or it may have already passed. I don't know. I don't have any sons, so I don't know.
I have two sons. I don't have any daughters, but I don't do any of those days like sibling day or friendship day
Yeah.
or anything like that. And I don't live in Michigan or Canada, so we don't do Sweetest Day. And when I left Detroit, it was amazing to me that nobody did it but us.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
all don't do Sweetest Day? What's
yeah. I
wrong
lived
with
in
you?
two other states, and that was not a thing.
Yeah, it's not a thing. So Detroiters, Michiganders, do your Sweetest Day because you're one of the few that do it. So my name is What Up Doe
I
today.
Yeah, see
That's
your
how
representative.
that's how we greet each. What Up Doe can mean a lot of different things, depending on how you say it and who you're saying it to. Um, but I recently was walking to the store. I had on a Detroit t-shirt, and a guy was jogging down the street, and he's like, "What up, Doe?" Meaning, I'm also from Detroit. And I was
Right.
like, "Hey, what up, Doe?" What up, Doe? To me, I remember it in middle school. I
Hmm.
don't remember it before then.
No,
So
that was kind of like a mid to late 70s kind of
yeah,
thing. It didn't
yeah,
start before then. Mm-mm.
for a lot of young people, that's all they know. I mean, they've heard it their whole lives,
Right.
but it didn't. It came out around the same time as Jingle Boots, if you remember Jingle.
Oh God. Oh Jesus. Jingle boots. Oh.
Like, why are we putting keys on our boot? What are we supposed to do with that? And our cousin sent me like a clipping, an old clipping about Jingle Boots, and they cost $20. I'm like,
Wow.
people were losing their lives over $20.
Yeah. So, like
I
it
did
was
not know that they were that inexpensive, even for the 70s. That's not that expensive.
no,
Or some
no.
shoes. There were sneakers that cost more in the 70s, to
Yeah,
be
yeah,
clear.
yeah.
But people were losing their lives over some Jingle Boots, some ragtag boots that weren't that comfortable.
And
That
not they were not I mean, it was a fashion, but like really? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what
But we
made
did
it
have
a
we
fashion
had
was the jingle, and the jingle came from your keys on
yeah,
the
but it was one type of boot that people were putting the
yeah,
keys on.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it was a particular book. And I remember we had a cousin that was bound and determined, as the old folks say, bound and determined to have some jingle boots. And I was like, oh my God, you know,
I wanted some Jingle Boots, but to be fair, Detroiters make fashion, so
more than
I,
people realize, more than people
yeah,
realize, because we do our own
yeah, so Detroiters make fashion, so we made that Jingle Boot jingle.
thing.
So of course I have my tiger hat on today because we're talking about Detroit and we're representing, the D as we say. Um, and I've been around, I've lived across the country. To be clear, the D is Detroit. So I know the people from Dallas very
Alice, yeah.
often might call themselves Big D or something of that nature. But when we're talking about the D is Detroit, to be
Right.
clear for anyone who's not from the D. When we were in college, they used to call Detroit the city. Like, are you going to the city? Are you going
Yeah.
to? Now, I've been around. I recognize that on in the Bay Area of California, San Francisco is the city.
Okay.
So much so that the Warriors even wear it on their jerseys.
Oh,
They'll
really?
have a jersey that says the
The
city.
city.
So I gave up the city. I'm gonna let San Francisco have that one. You can have that one, San Francisco. But the D is Detroit. So we're
It's the
gonna we're gonna make sure that we keep that solid for Detroit. So this week we're talking about Detroit in a mammoth kind of way. Um, Meaning how we got here, why it is what it is now, and all everything in between. So I'll start if you don't mind. Just
okay. Go right ahead.
because I did a little research. Actually, I worked on a book chapter about a
Ah,
well, it's about
ka-pow, pow, pow, ka-pow, pow.
is that your confetti?
Yeah, that's my confetti since we haven't figured it out yet.
So then we'll do that for the confetti. But it was a couple of years ago, actually. The book chapter has long since been published. And part of my chapter was speaking about the origins of Detroit and what made me me.
Okay.
So some of this, stuff I already had. So I will start with this information. The first documented presence of African Americans in Detroit dates back to 1736, with two slaves reportedly owned by the Campo family, who were fur traders, merchants, and land speculators among the first French colonists to settle in the region. Now, for those of us who grew up in Detroit, especially in the 70s and 80s, we know that Detroit was a French colony.
Hmm.
Hence, all those French
French
names,
names, yeah.
all those streets that are
Hmm.
in Detroit that we pronounce Gratiot,
Hmm.
but it's really Gratiot.
Well, I mean, when you consider even the name Detroit is really Detroit,
Right.
but we call it Detroit.
So, a lot of things in our area were French in nature. And I did know that most of the early settlers in Detroit were fur traders. So, when I hear about those furriers downtown or wherever they are now, I'm like, yeah, yeah, that's where they should be. That's how we got it there. Um, but Detroit's founder was Antoine Cadillac. That name sounds familiar.
Very much so.
As I look across, and as a side note, and this isn't part of my history, did you know that Cadillac would not sell to Black people?
Cadillac is what, GM?
Yeah, I think so. But they wouldn't sell that car, that brand to Black people.
Not totally surprised, which is probably why when we
Black people
could buy
wanted it so
it,
much.
when we could buy it, like everybody I know had a Cadillac.
I have one now.
Oh,
I didn't. I still see it as a symbol of, American made, luxury, if you will. But
American made, but I see it. When I think of a Cadillac, I really think about Detroit.
I think about Detroit, and I had a not American made car before, and all my Detroit friends were like, "How dare you?" I'm like, you don't work in the plant, you don't work for these companies. What does it? But they were like, you should support. So from then on, I've always had a Detroit, I mean, a American made car.
From the
But yeah,
point,
that was one of the
when
things
from
they
for
would go ahead.
I was just going to say, from the point that I um, became a union member,
Mhm.
that's when I have, tried to be more intentional about, those kinds of things, American made. And can't say that I do that across the board, but definitely with my cars. Yeah, I've been more intentional about having American made cars,
Well,
although
just
they're not all American made though,
right. But so that was just a tidbit. I got off track with that when I saw the name Cadillac. I'm like, hey, so black people used to actually ask white people to buy the Cadillac for them. Then Cadillac dealers would see black people drive, and it was a big thing, especially in Detroit, as you can probably well imagine, because the population in Detroit grew dramatically
but
because of the Great Migration. Just as a percentage piece, in 1930, 92.2% of all residents of Detroit were white, and
wow.
7.6% were Black. In 2020, 10% of all Detroit residents, 10.7%, were white, whereas 77.6% were Black. And, there's a growing Latino population. As of 2023, 77.9% of all Detroit residents are Black, but the white population is increasing it to almost 13%.
Mm,
So, as you can probably imagine, it would have been more and more difficult for Cadillac not to sell Black people cars if there weren't, any white people to buy them. So that's just some percentages about Detroit. But I want to talk a little bit about the Great Migration and what that did for Detroit in between those years of 1910 and 1970. What really made Detroit boom was the auto industry, of course.
correct.
You could get paid there, you could have a living wage. Um, but what really dramatically shifted the demographics of Detroit were the two world wars.
Hmm.
So at the beginnings of those world wars, especially when the army and the armed services was still so very segregated, where they didn't want Black people in there. They only took them, a small amount, or you were the cook or whatever. So these men went to war and there was no one to work.
Hmm.
So a lot of Black people were then able to fill those roles in both World War One and World War Two. So there was a lot going on there. And our parents, because I didn't realize that the Great Migration, we put years on things like we have baby boomers from this year to this year, and
Hmm.
Gen X, I think that's next from this year to this year, and Gen Z to this year to this year. No, so we tend to put years on things. So the years I found for the Great Migration were 1910 to 1970, which both of our parents migrated to Detroit during those years.
Right.
Different times, but during those years. Um, this last bit of history is the last piece I'll give about Detroit, um, because I feel that the two riots there, and we'll call them riots, kind of shaped Detroit. As we know, the riot in '67 was the beginning of white flight.
Mm-hmm.
We went back to the data, the demographic data in the 60s and looked at it in the 70s, it would be dramatically different.
Mm-hmm.
But there was another riot in June 20th of 1943. Prior to this riot, Black students and white students went to school together. So if you look at pictures from the 1920s, the 1930s, you'll see schools that are mixed, if you will, Black, white,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, et cetera. After this riot, you started to see some separation of the two, or even maybe before this riot. So I'm going to just say where this came from. In 1943, a Black rumor mill explodes with a story of whites who threw a Black woman and a Black baby off the bridge that connects to Belle Isle,
Wow.
or as we say, Belial. um, so meanwhile, while that rumor was going on through the Black community, there was a simultaneous rumor going on in the white community about a Black man who had raped a white woman. So
Mm-hmm.
Black men were looking for white men were looking for Black men. They met somewhere near the Cass corridor, and there was a riot at that point. Soon after that, Black people who had been living in Black Bottom, which was a predominantly Black neighborhood, there was the freeway came through.
Mm-hmm.
So, and decimated that neighborhood, not only Black Bottom, but Paradise Valley, which now has a freeway running through it. There's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of Detroiters who are trying to preserve some of that history. Um, but residents in this time, in this place, Black Bottom and Paradise Valley, were given 30 days to vacate their homes.
Can you imagine that? 30, 30
3-0,
days?
right. And so a number of the residents were relocated to the Brewster Projects, which, you know, I knew growing up because you're like, okay, don't go there. That's what you remember. But now we know the Brewster Projects has been torn down and is now some upscale type place. I think my son went to a music festival there a few weeks ago. So, you know, nowhere where Black people live is safe.
Mm-hmm.
So the second riot, as we know, or disruption, rebellion, whatever you want to call it, we were alive. I was one, so I don't remember it. I don't know what you remember, but it primarily took place on 12th Avenue, which we now know as Rosa Parks Boulevard.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and this was really about the inequitable treatment of Black people in
Mm-hmm.
institutions, in schools, at work, kind of brought on by that first rebellion that kind of separated everyone.
Right.
So for the next 20 years, they were living in this sort of squalor. Now you had this educational system in Detroit public schools where white students were in one school, Black students were in another, Black, Black parents felt their children weren't getting the best education. And, it just kind of swelled in that one
Mm-hmm.
summer, in that one instance where, and I'm looking for the words in particular, where an officer shot a Black man, a police officer shot a Black man.
Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of escalated throughout the city very quickly. Now, some people know that I didn't make this up. I got some of the information from a book called The Belle Isle Incident by J.L. Langlois. The book is from 1983. And some of the other information from the Detroit Historical Society, and you can find them online. Now, and I wanted to set all this up because we want to talk about the education system in Detroit. I've always said that my education in Detroit matches or surpasses anyone else I've ever met. There is no one who had the same quality of education that I did in a public school growing up in Detroit. And I've said that so often that people's like, well, that's not what I heard about Detroit. Well, I don't know what you heard, but I can tell you that this is the kind of system that I grew up in. What do you think?
Well, I mean, hearing you, you know, first of all, I concur. I absolutely agree. I I know that definitely the foundation of like, elementary school, middle school, like those teachers were so involved in making sure that we were the best of the best of the best. That, they often taught outside of the books that we did or didn't have. So I never knew that there was any inequity, to be honest, until I left.
Mhm,
Um, because we had such awesome, teachers
mhm,
and awesome schools. Now I can say that, um, you know, having been back and then having a school age, child going through the Detroit public school system, um, it was just kind of hit or miss. I mean, I
mhm,
think that there are a lot of schools where there are a lot of, good teachers like we have, but that's not always the case. Good principals like the ones that we had. And I mean, to be quite honest, when you talk about like elementary school, like the principal at that school was was white,
yeah,
um,
and old,
and older, and so which
older
to
than the
me,
teachers for sure.
which to me meant that he had a choice to be there. Um, you know, most of the teachers were black. I started school before you did,
Yeah.
so I can tell you that that wasn't the case in the beginning. The majority of the teachers were white, but then when we
Oh,
moved over to the school site that we eventually came in, that's when you saw these young black teachers, coming in, and then of course as the white teachers that stayed, once they retired, they were replaced, with black teachers. But I think that they were committed to, doing what they needed to do for us. I mean, I just remember, maybe not even understanding it then, but just even their own collaboration. Like they
mhm,
had, like they worked with each other to make sure we got, what we needed. So no, I didn't feel like I missed out on, like there's still some parts of history, that back history, to be clear, that I don't know.
mhm.
But I know that they did a lot about teaching us, about ourselves, about our community, um, teaching us to strive for more, to be the best, to, go to college, to, you know, you, just excel in whatever area. And they presented opportunities for us to be able to do that too, that went beyond just like the day-to-day schooling. But getting back to my daughter, so when it was time for her to go to school, like we had like kind of a quandary, like, okay, what are we going to do? And we did put her in public school for like her kindergarten year, which it was supposed to be, or it is, one of the best, K through 8 schools that there is in the city. Our the experience there though didn't lend itself to, the kind of things that I know that teachers did for us. Like, you know, they made sure that they always played to our strengths. And that, was kind of key because you have different kinds of skill levels in the school. So we did eventually pull her out and, put her in private school, and she stayed into private school until the eighth grade, until after eighth grade, she did public school for high school. Um, so it was a big difference.
Um, I don't know if our parents really had to think too much about what school we needed to go to.
They did.
I do know, like, and I think we said in an earlier episode, I went to Fitzgerald for 3 days, and our mother was like, "Oh no," and I was gone. So clearly there was something that was missing there, what she thought was missing there
Mhm.
that didn't match my needs, or who knows what teacher spoke to her and said, he needs to be at another school. I learned later in life that our teacher, or my teachers in particular, talked to our mother all the time,
Yeah,
and gave direction on where we should go and what we, should do. Did your earring fall off?
it's a lot of production.
uh, and I appreciate that. And it wasn't until, I was much older that Ma even mentioned that, oh yeah, your teacher had told me to do this, and I think that was really what made her send me to the high school I went to, which was Renaissance High School, because I didn't want to go. And, my teacher was really the one pushing it. One of my middle school teachers was the one pushing it. Like, no, that's where he needs to go, and this is what he needs to do. It was probably the best school for me. I don't know. I ended up being me, and that's fine. But I would probably have been me had I gone to another school that was not a neighborhood high school also. And not saying that was anything bad there. As a teacher, I can safely tell you it's not about the school, it's the teacher.
I absolutely agree with that. I think that the difference is one, especially when you're talking about the DPS system, it's, the underfunding,
Hmm.
you know, the resources aren't getting to the teachers. They're spending a lot of times dealing with, you know, behavior problems or the undereducation of some of the parents. And, like, I mean, so it's just a whole different dynamic than when we, were at school. But, you know, teachers are awesome. That's all I have to say. Like, the 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 ability to work with and I don't remember how many people were in our class back in the day, but when you're talking about classrooms with 30 and 40 kids, like that's
Mhm.
just kind of crazy to me. So I mean, so you're dealing with that too. And I mean, I think we talked last week about the fact like there's good and bad, in all systems.
Right.
I don't think that, that teachers are not trying to do their job. I mean, I stand with DPS. I stand with Detroit teachers.
Mhm.
One, because as you stated earlier, I'm very proud of, the public education that I received. Uh, there are none, I think that education helped me to get to the next phase and it helped me to get where I am now. Like that, that kind of is supreme in my life. Like in the past when I've done speaking, they want, to introduce you and you have your own introduction kind of um, typed out or whatever. That's what they prefer. Mine starts off, she was educated in the Detroit public school system because I'm very proud of that fact. So, I mean, it's a lot. I think that there's some systematic things that are happening in the school system now that wasn't, apparent, at the time. I mean, I think the inequity has gotten wider, where we
Mhm.
probably didn't see that when we were, in school. Um, and just across all systems, like I see it even in social work, like people who are retiring or leaving so fast that, your strong knowledge base is leaving,
Yeah.
and you have a lot of new people entering that don't have they have a skill set, but they don't have the longevity to be able to navigate that, to be as effective as some of their predecessors.
And before we leave this segment, I don't usually say that, I was educated in the Detroit public school system. I always say I'm from Detroit, though, because I'm very proud to be from Detroit. I just wear it as a badge of honor. But I definitely want to say, there were two teachers that I really feel just went above and beyond, um, even with not just with me in as their student, but helping our parents, navigate the education system. And I always tried to be more like those teachers and help parents understand, hey, here's what this is, here's what you do here, here's how this, magnet school works, here's how you could, do this, here's the future for you. So I want to say that those teachers are Miss Jackson, who was my fourth grade teacher. So hi, Miss Jackson. And Miss Akeem, who was my middle school teacher. I think I had her in seventh and eighth. So before, I just wanted to say that before we go.
Okay, so since we're shouting, like I gotta say that I had Miss Jackson as well. Supreme teacher, and I had the benefit of having her for 2 years. She was both my third grade teacher and my fourth grade teacher. So yeah, definitely shout out to Mrs. Jackson.
And
Mrs. Jackson.
Mrs. Jackson is the only teacher I think I ever had that you had.
Oh, yeah. Even
Yeah,
though we went to the same school. Yeah.
yeah, I think so. So, and I've said this a few times over the course of our episodes. So clearly, I don't live in Detroit. I've talked to friends over the years, and as we're looking at the numbers of white citizens moving back to Detroit, we've talked even when Detroit was in, at its lowest, or what we felt was its lowest, like in the 90s or whatever. We talked about, should we return? So we went out in the world, we got whatever talents, and should we come back to Detroit? So do you find a lot of people are leaving, coming back to Detroit? A lot of, maybe friends that you had and school and college, did they leave and are now coming back?
I mean, I think a lot of people came back, not now, but probably like in the earlier 2000s for whatever reason. I mean, some of it was jobs, some of it is, you know, our parents, aging parents, as we talked about a couple of times. And then yes, then you have those that like just I'm coming back because I want to um be a force in the city that helped to nurture me. As well as you have those same, those other people that never left for that same
Right,
reason. Like they didn't
right.
leave. They were like, I'm, ride or die Detroit. I'm giving back to the city that's always given to me. And so you have that dynamic as well. I mean, I think that people are still coming back. I think the more that we hear about what's happening in the city, you have more people, beginning to stand up and say, like, I want to be part of this movement or, this organization, or I'm founding my own, or I'm just kind of making a way. I mean, like um, I've known personally some, individuals that were very motivated to ensure that we have like grocery stores in Detroit. And people
Mhm.
don't realize that, what we have is liquor stores that may sell stuff,
Right.
but not really grocery stores. Like all the grocery stores in Detroit pretty much left. And
Mm,
so, so what we have is considered like food deserts. Like
right,
you can't, if you don't have any transportation, which people don't realize how many people don't have transportation, even though we're the motor city capital of the world, like, cars are not always affordable, even a used car.
right.
So so if I have to walk to the grocery store or Uber or whatever, but like, within my sphere, like there aren't a lot of places where people can get just fresh fruit, you know, um, fresh meat, things that, help to contribute to, our healthy well-being. So so that's why it's considered a desert. Um, for us, because of, the seasons, we don't have the farmers market,
Oh, yeah.
year round. You know, there are some available, but even when I kind of did look, when I was looking for like farmers markets, like there aren't a lot of farmers markets that are in the city, so, but there are places like, you do see, arising. You do see, because this is a concern that people are reaching out and either raising funds, being part of organizations, shifting their mission and vision so that it aligns with the needs of the current, city. You do see
Mhm.
that happen.
Do you remember the market? So we went to a grocery store that you had to drive to, but you could walk to a market.
Here to
And I
market.
don't remember them selling liquor, but I was a child, so I really wasn't looking, I'm sure. But it was like a little, it
No, it was
wasn't
a
that
market,
big,
but
but
it
you
was a
could
full market.
find, just
You
about
can
everything you wanted, but it wasn't gonna have like a whole bunch of it.
No, you could go there and shop for your family for dinner and get like some
You could,
healthy options.
you
Like you
could.
could do
They
that.
had meat, they had vegetables, they had fruit, they had, candy, of course, which we went there mostly for. But you actually could say, mine used to say, "Oh, I forgot cheese. Go to the
Yes, go,
store
yeah.
to get some cheese." Um, and we would, cross those two major streets and go to the store. But that's another story for another day. Our parents, I don't know if I think we do overprotect our children, and our parents probably let us just go. Like, yeah, you'll be fine. It's 2 blocks. Come on. Uh, our rapid fire questions only have one today. What is the
At
best
rapid
part of
fire already?
Detroit? Huh?
I'm sorry, we had rapid fire already?
We are rapid fire already.
Oh
What is the
wow.
best part of Detroit?
The best part of Detroit?
And you can have more
Uh,
than one answer.
Okay, because I was gonna say it was a lot. I mean, I I really love my city. I mean, I love the city, now. Um, Parks and Rec. I love that. Like I love that there was always stuff for kids to do. Even though I didn't do the swim mobile, I remember the swim mobile.
I remember this.
I just remember that there was always, opportunities for us to not just have book knowledge, but to, learn and grow and, do, other things. I I I love the school system. I love the teachers that, taught me, and some of them I didn't have, but I just appreciated, who they were. And even, in high school, I remember, as you were talking about teachers, I remember this one particular teacher, Mrs. France, who I love, love, love. I mean, I loved a lot of my high school teachers, but I remember her, talking to um, our mother about like what she felt like was going to be important for the nurturing of me. Um, the other part of it is, I mean, this is just an aside, like it helps when parents actually go to parent teacher
Well,
conferences.
I was going to say, I like that our mother listened
Oh,
Because
yeah.
sometimes parents will say, you can't tell me what's best for my child or something of that nature. And that's what makes a lot of teachers say, well, whatever, you do what you want then.
Yeah.
But trust me, I've been doing this for 15 years. I've seen X amount of kids. I'm with them all day. I kind of know. Anything else that you think is great about Detroit?
Um, you know, I mean, I love the music. I love that, it's not only Motown, but we have tech, we have house, like, I mean, there's so much here. It's a lot of entertainment. People don't realize that this is a great place to visit. Like, there's so much, you know, culinary, options and things to see. We have a lot of hidden treasures. We have a church that was part of the Underground Railroad. Like, I mean, just and you talked about Belle. It's like it's an inner city park, but one of the most beautiful
Oh,
parks,
Bella.
or I mean, islands that you ever want to see. There's so much, there's so much to our city that people don't really get the chance to understand that's here. And opportunities. I mean, small businesses thrive in this city. Like, I don't know. I mean, yes, I mean, we have our challenges, but there's so much in opportunities, so much so that we see people coming from other states
Right,
to take part in opportunities that they see here with Detroit being a thriving city.
right. I really liked growing up the ethnic festival
Oh,
because
yeah.
you learn, I don't know if that they still have them, but you learn so much during that summer
Hmm.
about everyone, Greek, Ethiopian. It was just so much the food, the music that you could take away from that. I really enjoyed that. And going to Belle Isle, of course, just riding my just riding my bike across the city. And I didn't stay in Detroit as long as you. I left after college. I partly left during college because I didn't come home very often. So I never lived in Detroit as an adult. I can say that.
Hmm.
So a lot of things that you would know and experience and love as an adult in Detroit, I don't know those things. I know it when I come back to visit and people say, "Oh, let's go here, let's go here." But those are great times because I recognize that they're filling my time. Like they're
Yeah.
making sure that I can see the best of the city as well. But I do really, I'm most proud that I am from Detroit, that I
Mhm.
was able to grow up in that. And I said this in a few other episodes, that very nurturing environment where people cared about me. And I know that, people considered it really dangerous and it was the murder capital of the world and all of these other things. And we now know the world's a big place. Like while they're saying this is a murder capital of the world, there are insurrections going on in other countries. So I'm
I was
like,
thinking the
that
same
can't be
thing,
true.
right? Yes,
Like
wow.
that's kind of impossible. But I do like when I visit and there are, like you said, there's always. So I was there a few weeks ago, and my best friend is also from Detroit, Highland Park, to be more specific, and we both live here in California. And I called when I was there, and I was like, "It's something to do. Like it's always something to do, regardless of age, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of gender." And that I can't say that is the same thing where I live now. So
Mm.
it's not always something to do for everyone.
Mm.
On that note, any last words?
I don't know. Look, I wish I do love my daughter, but I wish I had said I love Detroit.
Well, and you know what? I wanted to definitely make sure that we talked about some of those rebellions that shaped Black Detroit,
Hmm.
because both of those in part shaped definitely our schooling, because we
Hmm.
both started school after that 67 rebellion. So, of course, if there was white flight, that meant a lot of white teachers left.
Mhm. Right. So, and let me say this because I think that what, you know, again, we get the flag because I just saw something not too long ago about, the worst cities to live in as far as crime. And, Detroit was on that list. I can't remember which number we were, but I think one of the things that people miss is that Detroit is a city of influence. You know, Detroit politically has always had, the ear of whoever is, in the White House. We have strong organizations here, like you are aware, that the big three is currently, on strike, but there's some other ones going on too, like Blue Cross Blue Shield is currently on strike, UAW members as well. I was part of the UAW when I worked, with the state of Michigan. Um, but in other organizations, I think about like our fraternal organizations and Black churches, very influential across the country, not just the local city, like not just Detroit, like, you know, these are the people that are helping to be the ones that impact um, the ways or that we're handling situations, moving across systems, challenging systems. People want to know what's happening in Detroit. What are the thinkers saying in Detroit? So I think that that's important for people to know as well.
And on that note, we'll say goodbye. So, I'll see you soon.
Okay, bye.
Bye.